see on the listing agreement tonight, and we're going to go over some of the basics which you think may be too basic, but I'll give you a kind of a scary story tonight and share with you what has occurred and what we were able to figure out. So we are going to go over a case study tonight, as well as just go over some of the fundamentals of the listing agreement to kind of explain a few things to you guys. So if you do have questions or concerns throughout the call, if you want to send me a note, that would be fine. We will have Shannon, if there's some questions, we will go over those at the very end, or we'll get back to you if you have questions one-on-one. So tonight will be hopefully a good call, and you'll take a few tips out of tonight's call. So with the exclusive sale and listing agreement, the number one question I get is, should I use the 1A or should I use the 1B? And the 1A is used for everything. It is an exclusive. So unlike the 1B, which is not exclusive, the 1A is, and it does cover commercial, land, residential, condominium, manufactured home, pretty much anything that you're planning to list on the multiple listing service can be used with the 1A. So tonight we're going to cover the most common mistakes, and I'll show you some mistakes that were made. I don't want to put anybody, because I'm not going to share any names of somebody, but there is a deal that we're working on right now that we're settling out, because what had occurred was the agent, the issue that I'm dealing with right now, took the listing agreement, and then we started taking it off the market to do repairs, and then it expired. So let's talk about the term. The term is very important to fill in. In this particular scenario, the listing term was filled in, and it was filled in for October 30th. So you can go ahead and put in October 30th, Shannon. This is something that we took the listing back around Labor Day weekend, and we had listed it. So the list date went into that on line 19. So put on there September 2nd. So we were going to have a couple months to sell the property, which in this type of market in Puyallup, we would have had no problem in getting an offer and getting it sold in that time frame. So a lot of people ask me, well, Rochelle, what should I put for my term? The answer really depends. However, if there is a change to the term, what would be better to use is to use a different agreement, to use a Form 18 to extend the term. See how Form 18 has a section here. It talks about the agreement is extended until, and then the date, which would be later on, say it was the end of the year, which is what had happened. So if we go back to the 1A, what was not done, our agent had crossed off October 30th. She talked to the seller, and the seller was headed out for Labor Day weekend and said, you know what, we need some more time to do some carpeting and to do some work. Can we prolong the listing, or can we take it temporary off the market while we do some work? And the answer was yes. She did a Form 19. We took it temporary off the market. But what had happened is she had crossed off the term, because taking it off the market was going to take more time. And she had written in there December 30, I think it was December 30th. But the way she wrote it, she didn't type it, she just hand wrote it, crossed it off, got the parties to initial it, both the husband and the wife initialed it, and that would make the contract valid. The problem is the listing, the MLS, when we submitted the listing agreement to them, and we have proof that we did that, when we submitted the 1A that had all the cross-offs, unfortunately the listing input department looked at that and said, we can't tell that, because of the handwriting, that it was December 30th. We don't know what date that says. And so they were waiting for more response, and our agent was unable to get the sellers, because they were out of town, to sign the Form 19 to adjust it, or the Form 18 that would have amended the listing term. And then what had happened is, when October 30th came and went, it was active or it was temporary off the market, because they did the Form 19 and got the seller to sign off on the Form 19 to do temporary off the market. What had happened was the October 30th came, And because that was in the MLS and was date stamped and the MLS did not make the adjustment, you guys, we can debate this for the whole 30 minutes if we wanted, why the agent or why the listing department didn't change it. Our agent did not do a good job in communicating with the MLS using the forms that we had available. We only had the 1A and they didn't know what date. It was not legible according to the MLS input department. So what happened was another agent, another one of our competitors, called the seller on October 31st, because it was showing as an expired listing, met with the seller and took another listing. So we actually had two 1As that we had at play here. One that was, and both of them were binding. The reason they were binding was because we had to verify that there was Exhibit A attached. So that would be my number 2 mistake. Is number 1 mistake would be the term is not filled out or is not filled out correctly, or in this particular instance, it was not legible to the listing department who helps us put these things on the MLS. And the second thing is that the legal description must be attached as Exhibit A. What I'm seeing a lot of out there is that you are getting the listing agreement signed, but you may not have open title yet, and therefore you may not have a valid listing description or Exhibit A attached to the listing agreement. In order for the listing agreement to be enforceable, we need to have the legal description attached. The way to do that, to make sure that the sellers have indeed certified, made it official, made it legitimate, you may want to have the seller initial the legal description that you've provided from the title and escrow department. With commercial, that becomes a bit more challenging because it does take more time to get the preliminary title or the legal description from the title department. It takes them longer with commercial. Sometimes it could take them 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get a legal description. Some of the residential properties, for that matter, may take a bit more time to get a proper legal description, especially if there has been change of ownership or platting that's been done. So be sure that you have contacted, before you go on the listing appointment, you've contacted title company to get the valid or the proper Exhibit A or the legal description that can be attached. It says, and legally described on Exhibit A. So here's what could potentially happen. I hope this never happens to you. You meet with the seller, you get their signature on everything, you forgot to do the listing, call the listing or the prelim listing, get the Exhibit A. You have them sign the listing agreement, but on line number 5, it says it's legally described on Exhibit A. What if you turn in a 1A to the firm and there is no listing legal description attached? Does that make it an enforceable contract? It may, if you've provided a copy of the Exhibit A to your seller once you open up the title, or it may not if you have not communicated this agreement with your seller. If they don't have the Exhibit A attached with their 1A and they go talk with their attorney, we have in the past had an attorney say this is not a valid enforceable contract because you have the signed agreement by the seller, but there's no Exhibit A attached. So this 123 Main Street may not be a valid address and you may not have a valid listing agreement. So in order to prevent that from happening, I always recommend that you contact your title department. You can use any title company. I have relationships with many of them. And go ahead and open up title and get a legal description so that you can properly have this listing agreement signed. The third thing that people do, and it's inaccurate, is they put a list date on here and they put the list date and the date either comes and passes, or they have made adjustments to that, changes have occurred, and they've crossed things off and they have not got an initial on it. Whenever you cross off a contract, it doesn't matter if it's a purchase and sale agreement or a listing agreement, anytime you cross something off, it must have a legal description attached. So you need to have, you need to have the legal description initialed. Would be nice to have, but especially when you have cross-offs, when you have a change in the contract, it must have an initial next to it. You could put the initial right here in the column where it says 18. You can smash the initial there. You can put the initial right above it. between 2 and 3. You can put the initial over by term number 3, but anytime you do a cross off, it must have an initial next to it. In the example I gave you about the term being different, it had the initial next to it. It just was not legible. It was hard to read. So if you want to do any type of adjustment to the listing contract, maybe you're paying for something, maybe you're paying for staging, maybe you're doing something unique, you're putting a double posted sign, or you're doing a double listing where you have it listed in Mill Creek as well as in Bothell. Maybe you have something different that you're doing that requires acknowledgement, or you think may be helpful to have the seller acknowledge those things in writing. I would do it on a Form 18. So if you could flip to that, that would be great, Shannon. So in Form 18, where it says other, anything where you need the seller to get acknowledgement on, why don't you guys just type it right here into this big open box? It would be much better having it, seller agrees to reimburse listing agent $500 for the resale certificate. May be good to put that in writing so that we have something in writing where the seller has agreed to do that. Cert would be better to say certificate. It's better not to use vague language when you're writing these types of things. And then we have a valid agreement. This is an addendum to, just like a Form 34 would be an addendum to the purchase and sale agreement, the Form 18 is an addendum to the listing agreement. So anytime you do an extension, a price change, or you agree to reimburse anything or do anything special, like seller or listing agent or listing firm agrees to install a second for sale sign at the driveway of the listing, write that into the contract. Again, that's going above and beyond. Now you better honor and do what you promised to do, but why not put that in writing? That way everybody is on the same page and we don't have problems with a seller saying, I met with Rochelle and she promised me that she would do a sign and then she changed her mind or she went back on her promise. Again, we put everything in writing and that prevents those types of incidents from occurring. So use the other section, use the Form 18. Don't be crossing stuff off and initialing things and getting into a situation. We ended up saving with the double listing that we had with our competitor. What we had a buyer, we actually helped in procuring that buyer. We tried to go after it, do a referral agreement. We ended up settling on a referral agreement that was a flat fee, and we did our best to get and retain the commission that we had put into the listing. Unfortunately, the other agent who did have a valid listing agreement as well, but had a cleaner listing agreement, was able to prove to the MLS that they had the buyer, they had procured the buyer, they had gone through extensive inspections, negotiation, and our broker decided to walk away and just let bygones be bygones and take the flat fee and run and do something else with her future listings. But hard lesson to learn, especially when things are moving very quickly and you may need to have that Form 18, a blank one, in your car, especially in this agent's case where we were hand doing a lot of things. It would have been easy for her to go to her car, get the Form 18, and then have the adjustments made to the contract when we needed to change the price or we needed to change the extension on the instead of crossing stuff off and then initialing it, it would have been easier and cleaner to use the Form 18. Okay, let's go back to the 1A. Thank you, Shannon. The 1A, we go to term 4. Right above, actually, before I move on, line 21 through 24, that is still the highest complaints that come in that the MLS deals with, is because of agents promoting or advertising the property before it goes on the market. So it'd be like one of our competitors challenging us. Luckily, knock on wood, we haven't had anybody challenge us recently because we've done a good job in training you guys. We cannot promote on Facebook, on social media, any type of website, any type of email that goes out, any type of mailer, magazine, anything whatsoever. We cannot be promoting this listing on September 1st, or maybe we had a buyer that we were trying to do. So be very careful that you're not promoting, because our competitors look at Best Choice Realty Facebook pages a lot. They look at our website, and if you were to post something like on Zillow on the coming soon, you would be caught up in a potential complaint, most definitely with the MLS, if you post it on Zillow on their coming soon. They troll that. They troll Facebook. They've even gone so far where somebody has complained about an email that we've sent out to our database, and it happened to be one of those clients had a real estate broker, and they even turned us in, and luckily it was a first offense, and I was able to mitigate that and deal with that complaint so that our agent wasn't fined, or that we got a, that we had a black mark on our record. But be very careful that you're not promoting a listing before that date. If you need to, let's go ahead and adjust the date. You can do that on the Form 18 as well. If, for example, the seller is not ready to go and we need an extension, you could also do that on the Form 18. You could say Form 1A, Term 3 to be extended to, and then you could write the date. Say on this one would be September 15th, 2019, so that the buyer, or so the sellers have time to install carpeting, would be the reason for this. Okay, so that would be what we would do there. So again, be very careful that we have documentation to back up what we do. If you simply crossed off the September 2nd and you wrote September 15th, kind of between 17 and 18, yes, it can be messy. Just make sure you have an initial next to that, and that the seller has a copy. That would be another reason why we have problems with listing agreements, is does the seller have a copy of what they've signed? If they have no copy, is it a binding contract? Their attorney may claim that they do not have a binding contract if they do not have copies of what they've signed. So be sure, especially if you're typing some commission rate in here, that you have given them a copy of everything that they've signed. 6 and 3, that would be the way you write it. If the total commission is 6, which is actually quite normal when you're doing full service listings, we are seeing still 6% going on the top line, of which 3% goes to the buyer's agent. Now, if you are doing, and I still see you guys making this mistake, we do allow at Best Choice Realty the ability for you to represent yourself on, say, a listing and to take no commission. It would need to show this right here plus 3%. That would be if you were representing yourself or you're taking no commission. We still have to get paid, and we still have insurance and taxes that have to be paid, but that's the way it should be written. If you wanted to do an addendum, or if you want to talk with me offline about how we can take, a credit card for the 538.07, I'd be happy to talk with you about that. But that's how you get paid 0 commission. Some of you have asked me about that. Let's say that we change our mind and we want to do less commission. Again, if you're going to do less commission and we're making that adjustment, it would be better not to do it here. It'd be better to do it on the Form 18. So in that case, you would reference that section that you are changing, Form 1A, Term 4, to be modified as follows. Listing firm to receive 2%, period. Selling office firm to receive, thank you, end of my day here. And then this one, we did a 3% commission. We're going to leave that alone. So cooperating, but we want to be clear that it's listing firm to receive 2%, cooperating selling firm to receive 3%. If you change the commission and it's less than what you agreed on, you have to get the approval by the MLS. You cannot just make that change and offer less commission. That's a violation as well. So you cannot make that change without getting a written explanation by the seller to change that commission. So in the Form 18, all we did was modify line 29. That we can do without notifying the MLS. When we were offering less commission to the buyer's agent, we do have to have a letter on file with the MLS, and it has to be disclosed to the cooperating firm in the agent remarks, there has to be a letter on file if we are going to do less commission. And that's not initially, that's if we change it midway through the process. So if you are going to charge 2.5 and you put on the MLS 2.5 and you're paying them more, you don't need an explanation. It's only if you're paying the cooperating broker less. Okay, so you could run into problems if you don't do that. I had another question from an agent who asked me about security systems. If you go up to the top, Shannon, talks about seller's warranty. Go down second page. Key box, yes, you do have to put a key box. Seller warrants they're going to go ahead and they have the right to sell the property. Make sure that, and they are going to, that the property information on the listing input sheets are attached. They added this in recently. So we have been asking for listing input sheets, which I know is a pain in the butt. The listing input sheets, especially if you're data entering into the MLS directly from transaction desk. What I would recommend you doing if you do not have listing input sheets, and that's form 1, or there's various forms for input sheets, if they're not attached or you're not including them, you better have some way to ensure that your sellers are okay with what you are putting on the MLS. It says the sellers represents to the best of the seller's knowledge. There are no structures or boundaries or information. There's a section on the MLS that talks about homeowner dues, CC&Rs, information on the input sheets that are not part of the listing contract. You need to have some way of acknowledging, the seller acknowledges that they represent that the property does not have these types of disputes or issues with their CC&Rs or that type of thing. That's the reason why they incorporate the listing input sheets that are saying that they are attached and incorporated into this agreement is correct. They're warranting or making that appear if the seller had said something that, yes, it was on an HOA, but then they found out, I'm sorry, it was usually the other way around, the HOA is not on a HOA, and then we find out later it is, and there's fees associated with doing the transaction, then you're not held accountable to that. A lot of you guys are just kind of willy-nilly putting the listing together, getting the 1A signed. I get it's a pain in the butt to have them sign the listing input sheets, but you may want to have some sort of verification process that they sign off once you put it on the MLS, that they have some sort of proof that you have done it correctly, that you have inputted the way that they wanted it to, that it's incorporated into this agreement. You may want to have them sign off for initial, if you're not doing the input sheets, maybe your business practice should be that you have them initial the MLS sheet that gets syndicated out to all of the portals that has the information that you want to pull. That could be considered as an input sheet. I could make that claim rather than you having put the form 1s together and having them initial each page. This other agent had written, because there's nowhere on the 1A where it has the listing price, the listing input sheets also have the price. So if you are doing a price adjustment or a change in price, you could have them initial something. This agent, unfortunately, put it on the top of her agreement on the 1A and have the seller's initial, which also looks very messy. It's still a contract. This client still agreed to do the price adjustment from, say, $410 to $399, but she ended up still not using the Form 18. She went ahead and on the top of the 1A, go ahead, yeah, go to the 1A real quick, Shannon. She went ahead and wrote right here in the upper part above the exclusive sale and listing agreement, she wrote 409 and she crossed it off, and she wrote $399 and had the seller initial it, which would be binding. That would be a price change, and seller agreed to that. But it would have been better to see that on a Form 18 or a Form 19 with that price change. It would be less messy, and the listing agreement would be intact and not up for debate. So we would rather see the price changes again on the Form 19 or the Form 18, and then go ahead and make that change. All of you have the rights. I've given you the rights to make any changes to the, you can make changes to the expiration as well as changes to the price without sending anything into the listings department. And that's one thing when I had Justin Hag look at our situation where we had 2 listing agreements at play. And he said, I wish that your firm or that your agent would have just went in, because you did have the extension signed off on the first page where we had agreed to the term and the sellers had initialed. Why didn't you guys go in there and make that adjustment? And we had trouble because we'd already changed it to the temporary off the market, which then made it hard. We had to go through the listings department to make that change. But if the listing is in the active status and you are making a change to the price or the change to the expiration date, I would highly recommend you get the seller's approval before doing so. But then you do have the rights to go in there and make those adjustments to any marketing remarks, any type of listing extension that needs to be done, or price adjustment. You can make those changes yourself. Just be sure that you're doing it on behalf of the seller and the seller has allowed you to do that. You should have some paperwork. Be nice to have paperwork, but you do have the rights to do that. The last thing we'll go over, Shannon, before I take a few questions, is where it says, are the undersigned the sole owner, yes or no? This is a reminder for you to make sure that you have opened up preliminary title and that the person signing here right below that is indeed the person that should be signing. We've had some incidents where you guys were having the seller sign. If they are signing on behalf with the power of attorney, there is a way that they need to sign. If they are signing on behalf of like the executor, there's a way that they have to sign. So be sure you understand who you're dealing with and you've talked with the title department and you know that the undersigned is the sole owner and that they are signing on behalf of that person, or that is the sole owner, that we don't have a dispute at is the signature the correct person. We have had a couple close calls, and luckily we have good title companies that caught some things, and we reviewed the listing agreement so that we didn't have any problems down the road. So we corrected the things before. If we have to do a correction, we can do a correction with the Form 34. That's not a problem. Or we can use the Form 18 and check the other box and correct the seller's signature. Or we can add another person to the contract using the 22Z. There are some ways that we can handle this, but it would be best to make sure that when we check the box, are the undersigned the sole owner? Yes. In your mind, you want to think, have I contacted title and did I verify that the title report shows the exact name on the listing agreement? And if there's an adjustment, maybe with the middle initial, or maybe I said Fred instead of Frederick, or I made some sort of name change, why don't you go ahead and correct that before we get a purchase and sale agreement and make sure that we have the right party signing on behalf of the seller. You run the risk that we may not have earned our commission if we have the wrong seller signing, or we have the wrong entity, or even the name is spelled incorrectly. We run the risk that we could be challenged on our commission, and did we do a good job for our sellers? So watch out for those things. And then I think there were some questions, Shannon, that came in.
Yeah. I know one thing, especially with the undersigned sole owners, I know that would be fairly important, especially if there's been divorces or pulling people off title or those types of things, right?
Yes. Yes. Seller name changes on the 18 as well. Yes. Emily, definitely. That one just came in. Anything you make a change to, like I said, it'd be cleaner and better to use the Form 18 rather than to muddy the waters with the 1A. They don't leave you a lot of room to write, and the margins become a little bit difficult to see. I thought no problem, but
yeah. Another question we had, and it looks like it's just kind of just interested, I guess. What is the difference between the 1A and the 1B?
One is exclusive, one's not. The seller has the right to find their own buyers. And there is a broker at Best Choice where we will accept his 1B because he knows the difference. He works with his father as an investor, and his father wants the ability to find his own buyer. And we have allowed this particular broker to use the 1B, but you have to understand the 1B. And the 1B is not in your best interest if you're trying to generally work with most and exclusively represent the seller. You don't really want your seller finding their own buyers, and that's what the 1B does.
I had a question. They said, I know I cannot promote listing to my own social media if it's not active on the market yet. Can a seller themselves promote their own property prior to going on the market?
It says, and if you go back to the first page, Shannon, it does say that the seller also is, and now again, are they going to be sued? I don't know. I haven't heard of anybody being sued by doing that, where I decide before my agent puts it on the market, I'm so excited to be selling my family home. I mean, it says right here on the contract that I signed, provided further that if seller, let's see, where is it? Including but not limited to, firm and seller shall not promote. So in line 22, it says the seller shall not promote it as well. So the answer to your question is no. Have I seen sellers do that on Facebook? Yes. Do they put a picture? They don't put the address. They don't put information, about their price or about things like that. Yes. I mean, there's a way to do it without getting them, but I wouldn't do it. I mean, you purposely want to control how you market and when and how you market, the plan that you put. By doing it coming soon with the seller putting something out there, it does jeopardize the cooperative nature that we all agree to do at the Northwest MLS. So I'd say don't advise that a seller do that, because then in order they'd be breaching line 22 of our listing agreement. Have I seen people do it? Yes, and I haven't heard of anybody. If you guys hear of anybody, let me know of a seller being sued because they promoted their property before it went on the market. I haven't heard of anybody, but that doesn't mean that hasn't happened.
Right. Looks like Emily had another question. It says, I hear we use a FERPTA and upload it as an addendum to the listing, but we no longer need that form in the sales contract. Is that the latest supplement?
Yeah, FERPTA would be a disclosure. So on the FERPTA, if your seller is a foreign citizen, or is not, why not have them include, we'll cover that in a later call, but let's go ahead and have them bring the 22E to your listing appointment, and then just have them check the box and sign that yes, they are, or no, they're not, and then upload that as a supplement. And that should be a supplement that I would have on all my listings, just so that we can disclose and we can be confident that we've done our job at disclosing whether our seller is a foreign citizen or not.
And Jerry had one more note she wanted to mention. It says, please make sure if the seller is an LLC, that you have a member of the LLC signing the contract. An actual name of the person as an LLC cannot sign for themselves.
Good. Yes. So that would be, they have to sign like manager. They have their signature, comma, manager usually of the LLC. And there's a way that they need to sign as well. So you may want to consult with them or look at their LLC and who is the one. There's nothing wrong with asking them to provide you with a copy of how they, their entity, how they're set up. You guys all have LLCs, or some of you have LLCs set up. If anybody was to challenge, who was the signer of the LLC, they would need to know how it's spelled and how it's done. And there's nothing wrong with asking more questions about that. You're handling a lot of the affairs and how things are done, and you need to understand that, of who is the sole owner and who is the one that's responsible for the LLC. Very good.
I know that a lot of people question this, especially with the paperwork and here in the office when we're asking for those listing input sheets. In terms of best practice, like if I don't do those listing input sheets, what would be the best practice that I could do? My thought would be that you essentially take a copy of the incomplete listing and send it to the seller for their review prior to going after the market. That would probably be the best way to do it, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
But anytime you make adjustments, especially if they are related to, is it a condo? Is there HOA? I mean, some of that stuff before it's incomplete, you can go with an incomplete listing, but there's still things you have to put in. So as close to when you're about ready to go live on the market, my best practice would be to take that MLS sheet and send it to your seller and just say, I'm about ready to push the live button and make this go out to all the website portals and to the MLS. Is there any changes that you want me to make to the listing before we go live on the market? Please take a look and let me know by tonight at 9 p.m. and give them a deadline, because then they'll take a second look. And if there is something not right, or if there is something on the agent remarks, or there's something, maybe they had the washer and dryer and they all of a sudden changed their mind. They said, I don't want to do the washer and dryer anymore. you would need to make that adjustment fairly quickly. And then, you know, you have an email thread or a conversation between you and the seller that you could reflect, or that could be attached in essence to the listing contract, a communication or legal binding contract with the seller that tells them that this is what you decided to do per your recommendation or per your advice. We made a mistake on the X, Y, and Z, and we corrected it before we went live on the market. It's a lot harder to make those changes after we push the information out to all of the websites that we push it out to.
You'd also be able to get their approval on a price too as well.
Yes.
With using this listing info sheet.
Yes.
Yeah. Those are the questions that we had come through for our chats.
Okay. Anything else that I missed, Shannon?
Nope.
And then, yeah, the security system is stuck. Let me see here. There's a couple. Trio is what it's called. Some listing companies call it Trio. If you're going on an appointment, there's nothing wrong with you ordering if you're going on a listing appointment, order a preliminary title. That way they'll go in a little bit deeper. There's nothing wrong with doing that. If you're going to be up against multiple people, a preliminary title is going to take your title company more time to pull together. But if you know you're getting the listing agreement, you might as well order preliminary title. That way they'll check the names.
You've mentioned security systems, and Emily mentioned Ring doorbell as well. So would security systems, including like a Ring doorbell, be considered fixtures to the property to the point where the seller would not be able to take them with them to their next property?
It's a great question. You know, it depends on how they're installed. If they're installed hardwired into the property, then it would be considered, you know, part of the property. If it's not, if it's one of those hung on, you know, it's not screwed in, it's kind of attached really loosely, I mean, you could make the claim that it might not be. But most of those things are hardwired in to the way that the doorbells and the systems are. So be sure that you have properly noted that in the agent remarks. Security system stays with the property, or seller is taking the security system. Be sure you're clear on that, because it is very confusing with all this new technology out there. I will say with security systems, you can have them installed and you can have them, you don't even have to let the MLS know. They just cannot have the voice. It cannot capture anything. The sound has to be, the audio has to be turned off. But a seller can have any type of security system, visual, and record and have that running in any type of property that they wish. They just can't have the sound running. That's what they're agreeing to with the agreement here.
One more question, looking back to FERPA. It says, is FERPAs no longer needed if they are not a foreigner? And I would say that's a way of, because it's just a disclosure, correct?
It is a disclosure, and yes, so I apologize, Jesse, if I've misinformed you along the way, but if the seller is not a foreigner, it still is good best practice to have the FERPA, because that is the only document or disclosure that escrow is no longer responsible for. It. It's actually our duty as brokers with the contract. They've added that section onto the first page of the purchase and sale agreement. So the only way we know whether they have FERPA or not is that we have to disclose. There's a disclosure. So I would just get in the habit of including the 22E in your listing agreement, and then having the seller one way or the other check the box, because then that puts you at less of a risk. Otherwise, we have to kind of go off of, you know, what they've disclosed to escrow, what they've disclosed to us. What if the husband is a foreign citizen, the wife is not? I mean, we have all these types of one-offs. It would just be so much easier if you guys did the FERPA from the listing. When you took the listing, whether they are or they're not, have them disclose, have them sign, and then that becomes a disclosure that we upload as a supplement. That's the easiest way to deal with that.
Kind of like you would a 22K.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so have the 22K, have the 22E, and then if it's built prior to 78, why not have the 22J as a supplement as well? It just looks a lot stronger from the standpoint of setting up the buyer's agents and helping keep the deal together, and not having something that's not disclosed come out after we've got mutual acceptance. Okay, did I answer that? The FERPA took care of that one.
Yeah, it looks like we've answered everybody's questions. So,
let you guys go. Have a good week. Next week should be a great call as well. We're going to cover more listing related questions. I believe we're going to be talking about off market a bit. So those of you who are out there trolling for business and making good phone calls, and sellers are saying, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to go on the market just yet, we are going to cover that either in next week's call or the week after. So look forward to that. I want to make sure you guys have the proper training on how to take off market listings and do it correctly. So be sure to tune in for those next sessions, or at least review the recording on that. So have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Shannon.